Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here on early Saturday morning. My name is Conner Charlebois.
I'm Nick.
I'm Mark Frydenberg.
And we're all here. It's our honor to be here this morning from Bentley University all the way up in Boston, Massachusetts, to talk to you guys about a project that we've been working on. So what today's going to look like is it's going to start off with Mark talking about the CIS Sandbox, which is our Computer Information Learning and Technology Sandbox Center on campus. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how that set a new cultural paradigm for a tutoring lab and for tutoring centers. And then we're going to show you some examples of how that new culture has yielded student entrepreneurship. And then we're going to follow up with a case, sort of a case study on something that we've done. And then we're going to close with our next steps and some closing remarks from us. So without further ado, Mr. Frydenberg.
That'd be me. This is a picture of the CIS Sandbox, or Learning and Technology Lab, that we opened up at Bentley just 2 years ago. And it's a lab that I basically created with others when I was asked to take over our former CIS lab. And I realized that as part of the taking over the facility and managing it needed a new look that's more collaborative and more engaging for students. And also, I wanted to change the culture of the place around how students work together, both as people who use the lab as patrons and also as the tutors like Conner and Nick who work there, to create a space where their role goes beyond tutoring, so that the lab would become more of a learning community and sort of a startup mentality where students who work there also gain work experience through projects they do, either to maintain the daily operations of the lab, through blogging, through software management, through tutoring, through administrative facilities, and things like that. And so last year when I was here, I presented on fostering entrepreneurship in the CIS Sandbox, where I talked about some of the things that students were actually doing. And this year we're glad to be back to talk a little bit about this specific project that Nick and Conner worked on as an example of that.
So, like Mark said, the culture of the CIS Sandbox is really all around this startup culture, this idea of entrepreneurship. So, I'm going to show you some examples of how that's been happening. So, right from day one, something that we wanted to make clear was that tutors were free to sort of do their tutoring in the way that they wanted. So, one of the first things that our tutors started to do, with a little bit of direction from Mark, but essentially it was just a prod and say, go do this. So, what we started doing was making Excel tutorial videos. So, these are videos that students made and recorded themselves, and then put on our website for students to find help when they were going through assignments in IT 101, which is sort of our introduction to technology class. We've also had students lead crunch session workshops. So this is for IT 101 again. And way up at the front there is our colleague Matt, who's a tutor at the CIS Sandbox. And this is the night before our IT 101 Common Final. So this is a lot of, it's probably 3 or 4 freshman classes that are in there getting help the night before the exam. This was a
Looking
wildly...
at the text for the first time.
I'm sorry?
Looking at the text for the first time.
Looking at the text, probably most of them, more than we'd like to admit.
Excellent.
But so we had 3 or 4 of these sessions, and they were all packed like this. And this is all sort of student initiative. This was Matt sort of coming up and saying, I want to do this to help our students prepare for this exam. We also have students host mobile development workshops. So this is a friend of ours, Tim Miller, and he built a iOS application that maps out a lake that he lives near. So I think it's for boating, so he can sort of go out and tell where he is on the map and where he wants to go. Kind of neat. We've also had students contribute to our website directly. So a friend of ours, Connor McDonald, actually built his own WordPress theme from scratch for our Sandbox blog. And I think the only prompt that he had from that was enough of the tutors saying, our website sucks, we need to build a new one. so he took that initiative and he went and he built this, and it looks fantastic. And it's fully responsive as well, so it renders differently on mobile devices. So these are just some examples of what students have been doing in the Sandbox with this new culture, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about our project, which fits in here as well.
So basically, when students come into the Sandbox, we like to take some information from them, just so we know who's coming in, we know how many people come in, try and figure out what they need help for the most, and then send some of that data back to professors so they can sort of adjust their courses based on what students seem to be struggling with the most. So when I started working there, we had this old sort of disjointed system where basically students swipe in and we almost never see the data again until some graduate assistant goes through every month and pulls all the data together in Excel. Tutors needed to fill out a form after tutoring each student, and that was on a completely separate system, part of, I think we used Google Forms. And it was on some strange URL that was tough to remember, and it was tough to get to, and in general, students didn't like using the system, and Conner and I basically thought it could be a lot better.
So we made it so. And here's a quick video demo of our app sort of in action from a user's point of view.
So I'm just going to run through this real quick. So basically students come in, and now they swipe their ID, it automatically pulls out who they are, tap that they need help, and then they tap the course that they need. Then they're automatically going to be added to this tutor queue, which allows all of the tutors to see who's in the room. The form that we fill out about all of the information about how we're tutoring them is populated pretty much automatically. The student's name is filled in, the tutor's name is filled in, the course sections are pulled from the course that they selected, so it's only the sections of the courses that are possible. The only thing that you basically need to fill in is the duration and a quick description of the activity. So we've basically streamlined the whole process. And as soon as you submit that form, they're removed from the tutor queue, and all you have to do is tap out on the way out.
And get a nice wave from your lovely lab assistant. So thanks, Nick. So that was a quick flyby of what this looks like from a user perspective. So under the hood, here's what's really happening. So when Liz came into the sandbox and approached a touchscreen display, when she swiped her card, we looked up her student info in our database, and then we pulled back her name. Next, she gave us whether or not she needed help, and if she did need help, what class she needed help with. So we stored that information in our application database. And then from there, we sort of farmed that data out to different sources. So the first one that you saw was the tutor queue. And that's actually something that's displayed on a Google TV that we have in right when you enter the room. So everybody in the room can see that. But we also wanted that to be accessed by tutors from their phones or from their laptops. So whenever a tutor is in the room and tutoring, they can see who's in the room and a list of sort of what they need help with and whether or not you should sort of help them. The information is also farmed out to an iPad on the wall, which we saw as Liz tapped out. So once you just touched her name to let us know that she was leaving the room. And then again, that wait queue is also displayed on tutor devices for the tutors.
So some of the technologies that we used. On the project management side, Trello is basically our roadmap. That's where Conner and I and Mark to some extent have gone through and sort of built out our plan for how we're going to go forward. That's where our next features go. That's where it's basically the roadmap for where we want to end up. GitHub manages all of our code. So basically all of our code is backed up and open source and available freely on GitHub. So any of the other tutors and really any of you, if you wanted to, can go and look over my poor JavaScript and make fun of me for it. But on the client side, we made heavy use of Twitter Bootstrap, which was basically our whole user interface. It's basically an HTML5, CSS3 framework that took care of a lot of the styling details for us, so we could just really focus on development. We also have a decent amount of all the stuff in the red sort of comprises this Meteor JS framework that is a client-side, server-side JavaScript framework that we use to do most of the development, all of the back-end and front-end interaction with MongoDB as a document database on the server as well.
All right, so not all of this was easy, and we found that out very quickly this semester. So the sandbox culture is very good at enabling people. So Nick and I literally went from 2 students sitting around a table in the sandbox to me being like, hey Nick, our swipe system is garbage, do you want to rebuild it? And not knowing really what he was getting himself into, he said, okay, sure. So we knew that we'd be able to do it because the culture of the sandbox is so supportive, and because Mark's style of leadership for the sandbox is very much a style of leadership by enablement. If you want to do something, he's going to do everything that he can to allow that to happen. So we knew that it could happen, but we weren't really sure what to do to make it start happening, if that makes sense. So we were never really in question of whether or not it would get done. If you asked us way back in March whether or not we thought we'd be in San Antonio presenting a paper on it, we certainly said no. But alas, here we are. We were never in doubt that the project would actually get finished.